While my cousins celebrated with champagne towers and inheritance checks for $18 million each, I stood in the corner clutching a yellowed plane ticket to Monaco, my grandfather's final joke. They laughed at me. 3 months later, those same cousins were begging me for loans as their empires crumbled. My name is Alexander Reeves, and this is how a forgotten promise hidden in 6 words whispered by a dying billionaire transformed me from family laughingstock to their greatest fear. What my grandfather understood, and they never did, was that true wealth isn't measured in mansions. Because the dusty ticket I despised, it was actually the key to everything. At 34, I had what most would call a perfect life. I woke up every morning at 6:15 in my downtown Seattle apartment, 16 floors above the perpetually rain-soaked streets. The first hour belonged exclusively to me, French press coffee on my balcony, watching the ferries glide across Elliott Bay while checking markets in Asia. By 7:30, I'd be dressed in one of my 12 identical charcoal suits, heading to Fairchild Investment Group, where I managed portfolios for the obscenely wealthy. Alexander James Reeves, Senior Investment Manager. I loved introducing myself that way. It carried weight, suggested competence and control. My colleagues called me the calculator for my ability to spot undervalued companies before anyone else. My office featured just one personal item, a worn silver pocket watch that belonged to my grandfather, Earl Reeves, displayed on a custom stand. Not particularly valuable, but Earl had carried it through 60 years of building the Reeves family fortune from nothing. "Markets don't lie, people do," he'd told me once, clicking that watch open. "Remember that, Alex." Professionally, I excelled. Personally, I had my girlfriend Vanessa, a curator at the Seattle Art Museum with perfect taste and impeccable family connections. Tuesday nights were our standing dinner at Canlis. Thursday evenings meant gallery openings or charity auctions. We moved in the right circles, knew the right people. After 2 years together, the diamond ring in my desk drawer waited for the perfect moment. I'd planned a weekend in Napa Valley the following month. If my parents had lived to see me, they might have been proud. Their absence, a car accident when I was 8, had left me raised by my mother's sister, Aunt Elaine, alongside my 3 cousins, Marcus, Diana, and James. I'd always been the odd one out, the charity case they reminded me I was at every family gathering. "Dad says you're really just a glorified bank teller," James said at Christmas the previous year, swirling 30-year-old scotch in his glass. He'd never worked a day in his life, living off the generous allowance my grandfather provided. "Someone has to actually work in this family," I'd responded, feeling Vanessa's hand squeeze mine in warning. Family gatherings were always a minefield, especially when grandfather was present. Earl Reeves was not a warm man, but he was fair. At 92, he still went to his office 3 days a week, still signed every major contract personally. While my cousins received extravagant gifts, sports cars, vacations, even a small yacht for Marcus's 30th, I received books on finance, subscriptions to economic journals, and once a framed copy of my college diploma with a note that read simply, "Earned, not given." I treasured that frame more than any other possession. The first sign that something was changing came on a rain-soaked Tuesday in April. My quarterly dinner with grandfather, always at his club, always just the 2 of us, was suddenly canceled by his assistant. "Mr. Reeves sends his apologies, but he's meeting with his attorneys tonight," she said, her voice unusually stiff over the phone. "Family matters." Family matters that didn't include me, apparently. That evening, I saw Vanessa's Instagram post. A photo of her, my 3 cousins, and my grandfather at his club, glasses raised in a toast. She'd never mentioned the invitation. "It came up last minute," she explained later, not quite meeting my eyes. "James called while I was at work. I assumed you were busy or they'd invited you separately." I believed her, because that's what you do when you love someone. 2 weeks later, grandfather missed our regular Sunday call for the first time in 15 years. When I called his house, the housekeeper told me he was in meetings with the family. Again, a family that somehow excluded me. Then came what I now call the photograph. A business contact forwarded me a society page from Monaco. There was Vanessa, radiant in white, standing on a yacht beside my cousin James. Their hands were intimately linked. Her head tilted back in laughter. The yacht belonged to my grandfather. "Probably nothing," my colleague Martin said, watching my face as I stared at the image. "Families vacation together all the time." But Vanessa had told me she was in Chicago that weekend, at a museum conference. When confronted that evening, she sighed, removed her key to my apartment from her purse, and placed it on the kitchen counter with surgical precision. "James and I have been together for months," she said, her voice carrying no trace of remorse. "Your grandfather knows. Everyone knows, Alex. We were waiting for the right time to tell you." "The right time?" I repeated, feeling as though I'd been struck. "And when exactly is the right time to tell someone they're being betrayed?" She collected her coat, paused at the door. "You should know that things are changing with the family business. Earl is restructuring everything. James asked me not to say anything, but—" She hesitated, something like pity crossing her face. "You might want to consider your options. Look for other opportunities." The next morning, I was called into my firm's main conference room. The board members sat in grim formation, my direct supervisor unable to meet my eyes. "We're terminating your employment, effective immediately," the CEO announced. "We've received information about a significant conflict of interest." "What conflict?" I asked, genuinely bewildered. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a fabricated trading statement showing inappropriate investments in my personal account, trades I'd never made, signatures I'd never signed. "These aren't mine," I said, my voice hollow. "Your grandfather's office sent them directly. He personally vouched for their authenticity." The security guard waiting to escort me out was a final humiliation. I carried my few possessions in a cardboard box past colleagues who suddenly found their shoes fascinating. By noon, my access cards were deactivated. By 3, my broker called to inform me that my accounts were frozen pending an investigation. By dinner, my landlord had delivered an eviction notice. The building, I discovered, was owned by a Reeves family subsidiary. I sat on my balcony that night, watching the same fairies I'd admired that morning, wondering how life could collapse so completely in 12 hours. My phone rang, my aunt's number. "Earl passed away an hour ago," she said without greeting. "The funeral is Thursday. Come if you want, but the family would prefer if you didn't make a scene." I whispered condolences she didn't acknowledge before hanging up. Then I opened my grandfather's pocket watch, running my thumb over the inscription inside. "Time reveals truth." I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. Month 1 after the funeral was a blur of rejection letters. Every investment firm in Seattle suddenly had no openings. References that had once praised me now didn't return calls. My savings, what hadn't been frozen, dwindled with alarming speed. The $14,000 I'd set aside for Vanessa's ring went to attorneys who took my money, then stopped answering my calls. Month 2 found me selling possessions. My watch collection, $8,700. The signed first editions of financial classics, $3,200. My grandfather's pocket watch stayed, though a dealer offered $1,500. Some things aren't for sale, even when you're desperate. Month 3, I downsized to a studio apartment in a neighborhood where sirens provided nightly lullabies. $950 per month, utilities not included. My new wardrobe came from thrift stores, $124 for everything I needed. My new diet consisted of ramen noodles and whatever was on clearance. Former colleagues crossed the street to avoid me. Former friends suddenly had no room at their dinner parties. The rumor was that I'd embezzled from clients, used insider information, betrayed my grandfather's trust. None of it was true, but truth is irrelevant when power decides otherwise. Only Martin from my old firm maintained contact, meeting me for coffee once, his eyes darting nervously as if being seen with me might be contagious. "It's bad, Alex. Your cousins are dismantling everything, selling off divisions, firing loyal employees, extracting cash however they can. Your grandfather's legacy is being liquidated for quick profits." "Why would they do that? The company was worth more intact." Martin leaned closer. "Word is, they found out about some massive debt. The company was leveraged to the hilt. Everyone's trying to grab what they can before it all collapses." This made no sense. My grandfather was conservative financially, almost to a fault. But before I could press further, Martin received a text and abruptly left, dropping $40 on the table, more than enough for coffee, but he knew I needed it. By month 4, I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor, my apartment barren except for a folding table where I sent out dozens of unanswered job applications daily. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday, rent 3 weeks overdue. That same day, I received an invitation. Cream-colored cardstock, Reeves family crest embossed in gold. The reading of Earl Reeves' will delayed for months of necessary legal preparations. My name was misspelled. The conference room at Blackwood & Myers Legal Associates gleamed with old money. Mahogany tables, leather chairs, oil paintings of stern-faced founders. My cousins barely acknowledged me as I took the only remaining seat at the far end of the table. I wore my least wrinkled shirt, but still felt like a vagrant in a palace. James smirked from beside Vanessa, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders. Diana examined her manicure, bored already. Marcus tapped impatiently on his phone. Aunt Elaine, dressed in tasteful morning attire, spoke to the senior partner as if I weren't there. "Can we please begin? Some of us have actual responsibilities." The attorney, Solomon Blackwood, nodded gravely. "Of course, Mrs. Reeves. We'll start with the distribution of assets." What followed was a recitation of obscene wealth being transferred. Marcus received real estate holdings valued at $23 million. Diana acquired art collections and investment accounts totaling $19 million. James was granted controlling interest in 3 subsidiaries worth approximately $18 million. Vanessa squeezed his arm adoringly with each announcement. My aunt received the family home and a substantial monthly allowance for the remainder of her natural life. Then Blackwood turned to me. "And to Alexander James Reeves, Earl leaves this envelope, to be opened in private, and this one-way plane ticket to Monaco, departing tomorrow evening." The laughter started with James, spread to Diana, then Marcus. Even my aunt permitted herself a thin smile. Vanessa had the decency to examine her shoes. "A ticket to nowhere," James said, wiping tears of mirth. "Classic Earl. He always said you'd end up with nothing." I accepted the envelope with numb fingers, the ticket inside dated for the next day. First class at least. A final trip before complete destitution. "Is there anything else?" I asked the attorney. "That concludes the reading," Blackwood confirmed, closing his folder with finality. As the family rose to leave, James approached, Vanessa trailing behind him. "You know, I could buy you a drink," he offered with false generosity, "for old time's sake, before you disappear to Monaco or wherever you end up. Probably best if you don't come back, though." I looked at him, this cousin I'd grown up with, who'd played with me as children before status and money poisoned everything, and then at Vanessa, who couldn't meet my eyes. "I never understood what grandfather saw in you," James continued, his voice dropping to ensure only I heard. "Always his little project, the charity case, Well, he finally saw the truth before he died. You were nothing to him in the end. That night, I stood on the Aurora Bridge, watching black water churn below. Not to jump, I wasn't there yet, but to feel something, anything beyond the hollowness. A homeless man approached, pushing a shopping cart filled with aluminum cans. "Spare some change?" he asked, his weathered face kind despite missing teeth. "I have less than you," I answered, honestly. He studied me, then offered a granola bar from his coat. "You look worse off than me, friend. Take it." Jeremiah was his name. He'd been an accountant before alcoholism took everything. He showed me his spot under the overpass, relatively dry, hidden from police. He taught me which shelters were safe, which churches offered meals, which store owners might offer day work. The granola bar we shared was the first food I'd had in 36 hours. "You still got choices," Jeremiah said as we huddled under a tarp, rain hammering around us. "Got that fancy paper in your pocket. Ticket somewhere? I see it peeking out." "Monaco," I said, almost laughing, "where the rich go to play." "So go," he shrugged. "Can't be worse than here." An elderly woman approached our makeshift shelter, clutching half a sandwich. She silently broke it, offering a piece to each of us. I tried to refuse, but Jeremiah shook his head sharply. "You accept what's offered with grace," he whispered. "That's how we stay human." I accepted the food, watching raindrops splatter on the Monaco ticket. Tomorrow, I'd be homeless in Seattle or homeless in Monaco. At least the latter would be warmer. If you're feeling touched by this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. In the comments, share, have you ever experienced betrayal or injustice? Let's create a supportive community together. The Monaco airport gleamed with wealth, a temple to excess, where even the janitors wore designer uniforms. I stood in the arrivals hall, unwashed, unshaven, wearing the same clothes I'd had on for 3 days. Security eyed me suspiciously. I had exactly 43 euros left from exchanging my last dollars. The plane ticket had included a note with an address, Hotel de Paris, Suite 512, but walking into that establishment looking as I did would get me arrested before I reached the front desk. A young man in an impeccable suit approached, holding an iPad with my name displayed. "Mr. Reeves, I'm Claude from Mr. Blackstone's office. We've been expecting you." "There must be a mistake," I said, backing away slightly. "No mistake, sir. Your grandfather was very specific. The car is waiting." I followed him outside to a gleaming Bentley, where the driver took my worn backpack with white gloves and a straight face. 20 minutes later, we pulled up to the Hotel de Paris, where I was whisked through a private entrance to avoid disturbing the other guests. The suite was larger than my Seattle apartment had been. Fresh clothes in my exact size waited on the bed, along with toiletries and a note. "Shower, change, and join me in the sitting room when ready. RB." An hour later, freshly groomed and dressed in clothes worth more than everything I'd owned in the past month, I met Roland Blackstone, a man in his 60s with silver hair and the confident posture of someone who regularly delivered life-altering news. "You look like your grandfather," he said, studying me over half-moon glasses. "He said you would arrive looking rough. Like a stray dog," were his exact words. He also predicted you would keep the pocket watch, even when selling everything else. My hand instinctively went to the watch in my new pants pocket. How could he know that? Earl Reeves knew people better than they knew themselves. "Please, sit." He gestured to an armchair across from him. "What I'm about to tell you will seem impossible, so I'll show you evidence as we proceed." Blackstone placed a thick manila envelope on the table between us. "Your grandfather was not broke, quite the opposite. The debt your family discovered was an elaborate fiction, a trap Earl created specifically to identify who could be trusted with his true legacy." He slid a document toward me, a forensic accounting report. The companies your cousins inherited are shells, designed to collapse within months. The real reef's fortune is held in a complex structure of offshore entities, bearer bonds, and private investments valued at approximately 2.7 billion euros. I stared at him. That's over 3 billion US dollars, yes. He removed a USB drive from his pocket. This contains video recordings of conversations between your grandfather and each family member over the past year. I warn you, they're disturbing. The first video showed James in Earl's study. "Of course I'll liquidate everything once you're gone," my cousin laughed. "What's the point of building if you can't cash out?" Diana was next. "Alex? He's a nobody. Just cut him off completely." Marcus: "We could put him in some meaningless position to keep him quiet." Vanessa: "He's too trusting. It makes him weak." Even my aunt: "My children deserve everything. Alexander was always a burden." My stomach turned with each revelation. Then came the final video. My grandfather, gaunt but clear-eyed, looking directly at the camera. "Alexander, if you're watching this, you've taken the ticket to Monaco. Good. It means you still have some fight left." He coughed before continuing. "I needed to know who deserved my legacy. Not the houses or the money. Those are just things. I needed to know who would protect what I built. The thousands of jobs, the foundations, the research grants. Your cousins failed every test. They saw only dollar signs where I saw responsibility." He leaned closer to the camera. "I'm sorry for the pain this caused you. Sometimes we must lose everything to discover what we're made of. The words I need you to remember, the key to everything: time reveals truth in unexpected ways." The inscription from the watch, with one crucial addition. Blackstone paused the video. "Those 6 words activate a series of trust provisions. The watch in your pocket contains a microchip that, when scanned with the proper equipment, confirms its authenticity and your identity as the rightful heir." I pulled out the watch, suddenly seeing the small, nearly invisible seam where the chip must be hidden. "Your grandfather created an elaborate game," Blackstone continued. "He needed to know if you would keep something of sentimental value even when desperate. James would have sold it immediately." The video resumed. Grandfather looked tired but satisfied. "You'll find that Vanessa and James were working together for over a year. The trades that cost you your job were fabricated on James's orders. Your apartment building was purchased specifically to evict you. It was all a test, and, while I regret the suffering, I needed to be certain." Blackstone produced more documents, evidence of each betrayal, carefully documented. "Your grandfather arranged everything, even ensuring you would meet Jeremiah under the bridge." Jeremiah was part of this? The kind homeless man who'd shared his food? Former CFO of a shipping company, retired 15 years ago. One of your grandfather's oldest friends. He reported that you shared your food with an elderly woman even when you were starving. That was the final test. I sat in stunned silence as Blackstone laid out the full plan. The real Reeves fortune would transfer to my control through a series of steps, beginning immediately with $10 million in a new account. The rest would follow after completing a 6-month orientation with my grandfather's most trusted advisors. "Meanwhile," Blackstone said with a thin smile, "your cousins should be receiving some rather disturbing calls from their bankers right about now." "What exactly is happening to them?" I asked. "The companies they inherited were structured with hidden debt triggers. As of noon today, all assets are frozen pending fraud investigations that will inevitably clear you and implicate them. They haven't actually committed fraud, but the legal entanglements will take years to resolve. By then, they'll have spent most of their inheritance on legal fees." I stared out at the Mediterranean through the suite's windows, overwhelmed. what am I supposed to do with all this? That, Blackstone said, is entirely up to you. Revenge, justice, forgiveness. Your grandfather believed you would make the right choice, whatever that might be. If this revelation surprised you, just wait, it's not over. Share this video with someone who needs to believe life can turn around when you least expect it. 3 weeks in Monaco gave me time to absorb the magnitude of my grandfather's plan. Blackstone arranged for the world's finest financial minds to brief me daily. I learned about philanthropic trusts, investment structures, and corporate governance from people who charged $1,500 per hour and now worked for me. My first decision was simple. I transferred 100,000 euros to Jeremiah through a foundation that would provide him housing, healthcare, and dignity without overwhelming him with sudden wealth. The elderly woman who'd shared her sandwich, Maria Teller, received similar care. Some debts can never be repaid, but they must be acknowledged. Meanwhile, the Reeves empire was being quietly reclaimed. Earl had built in legal mechanisms that allowed me to freeze acquisitions, halt asset sales, and prevent the wholesale dismantling my cousins had planned. With each signature, I felt my grandfather's approving presence. "You're a natural at this," Blackstone observed one evening as I reviewed complex financial projections. "Your grandfather said you would be. The boy thinks 3 moves ahead," he told me once. I kept tabs on my family through reports Blackstone provided. Marcus had already sold 3 properties at desperate discounts to cover margin calls. Diana's art collection was heading to auction. James had laid off 200 employees to cut costs, then discovered the severance packages, ironically designed by me years earlier, triggered catastrophic penalties. As for Vanessa, she'd already moved on to a shipping magnate's son, having determined James's fortune wasn't as secure as advertised. 6 weeks after arriving in Monaco, I returned to Seattle, not as the broken man who'd left, but as controlling shareholder of Reeves Enterprises. My new office occupied the entire top floor of the building, where I'd once been escorted out by security. Martin, my former colleague, was my first hire. "I knew something was wrong with their story," he said, adjusting to his new corner office. "I just couldn't prove it." The family confrontation was inevitable. I arranged it for a Tuesday morning, exactly 4 months since the funeral, in the boardroom where my grandfather had built his legacy. Security guards stood discreetly by the doors as my cousins and aunt arrived, each looking noticeably worse for wear. James entered last, his previously immaculate suit showing subtle signs of strain, missed dry cleaning, a slight fray at the cuff. His confidence wavered visibly upon seeing me at the head of the table. "What's this about, Alex? Our attorneys said something about an emergency board meeting." His voice maintained its usual condescension, but I detected the underlying fear. "Please, sit." I gestured to the chairs around the table. "I've called you here to discuss the future of Reeves Enterprises." Diana scoffed. "What exactly gives you the authority to call anything? You're not even a shareholder." "Actually," I slid documents across the table, "as of 3 weeks ago, I control 61.4% of all voting shares. Your collective holdings represent approximately 12%, mostly non-voting stock." The color drained from their faces as they frantically flipped through the paperwork. "This can't be legal," Marcus stammered. "We'll challenge it." "You're welcome to try," I replied calmly. "The attorneys who created this structure are the same ones who represented our grandfather for 40 years. I think they know what they're doing." Aunt Elaine, always the most composed, studied me with newfound respect. "Earl," she said quietly. "This was Earl's doing." I nodded. "Grandfather planned everything, down to the last detail. The companies you inherited are worth approximately 1/10 what you believed. The real assets were held elsewhere." "Why would he do this to us?" Diana's voice cracked. "We're his family." "So am I," I reminded her. "And yet you had no problem watching me lose everything." James slammed his fist on the table. "This is bullshit. You can't just take what's ours." "I haven't taken anything that wasn't given to me." I opened my grandfather's pocket watch, placing it on the table. "Time reveals truth in unexpected ways." That's what he told me. That's what this was all about, revealing truth. I pressed a button, and screens around the boardroom illuminated with videos, the same conversations Blackstone had shown me in Monaco. My family members watched in horror as their own words condemned them. When the screens went dark, I continued. "I've made some decisions I'd like to share with you. First, none of you is being cut off entirely. Grandfather wouldn't have wanted that. You'll each receive a monthly allowance. Generous, but not extravagant. Second, your positions within the company are terminated, effective immediately." "You can't do that," Marcus protested weakly. "I can, and I have. However, I'm also establishing trust funds for your children. They shouldn't suffer for your mistakes." Auntie Lane looked up sharply. "Why would you do that after what we did?" "Because, unlike you, I remember what family should mean." I gathered my papers. "The allowance comes with conditions: community service, financial counseling, and regular ethics training. Accept these terms, and you'll live comfortably. Reject them, and you're truly on your own." James stood, his face contorted. "You think you've won? You think this makes you better than us? You're nothing but Earl's puppet, dancing to strings he pulled from the grave." I remained seated, watching him calmly. "No, James. I'm the person who shared his last granola bar with a stranger while you were drinking champagne in my ex-girlfriend's bed. That's the difference between us." The security team escorted them out. As James passed me, he hissed, "This isn't over." "Actually," I replied, "it is. The difference is I'm giving you a softer landing than you gave me." 2 months later, I sat in a shelter downtown, not as a resident, but as its new benefactor. The Reeves Foundation for Second Chances had just purchased the building with plans for expansion. Jeremiah, now the shelter's director, showed me the renovations underway. "You didn't have to do this," he said, surveying the construction. Yes, I did. I handed him the operational budget for approval. "Some people showed me kindness when they had every reason not to. I'm just paying it forward." As we walked through the dining hall, I spotted a familiar face, the elderly woman who'd shared her sandwich with us that rainy night. She was serving food to others now, a gentle smile on her face. "Maria's our volunteer coordinator," Jeremiah explained. "Started the day after she got housing through your foundation. Said she needed to keep giving back." I nodded, understanding completely. In a world that had shown me both extraordinary cruelty and unexpected kindness, the path forward was suddenly very clear. 2 years later, I stand at the window of my office, watching Seattle's skyline glitter in the autumn rain. The pocket watch sits on my desk, a constant reminder of the journey. Where once I measured success in portfolio returns and acquisition metrics, now I track different numbers. 47 homeless shelters established across the country, 1,200 scholarships for disadvantaged students, 3,400 jobs created through our microfinance initiative. Reeves Enterprises has transformed. The predatory divisions have been restructured, the toxic executives replaced. Our employee satisfaction scores rose 64% in 18 months. The company valuation has nearly doubled, proving that ethical business can also be profitable business. My grandfather's legacy isn't just intact, it's evolving. As for the family, they've each followed different paths. Marcus accepted the conditions and now works with addiction recovery programs. His own struggle with alcohol finally addressed. Diana resisted initially, but came around 6 months later when her art gallery failed. She now helps curate collections for our charitable foundation, her expertise finally channeled productively. Aunt Elaine surprised everyone by volunteering at a grief counseling center. "I never properly processed your parents' death," she admitted during our first civil conversation in years, "or what it did to you." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a beginning. James held out the longest. His pride couldn't accept the new reality. He launched 3 separate legal challenges, each dismissed more quickly than the last. 8 months ago, his final appeal rejected, he appeared at my office without an appointment. "I'm broke," he stated flatly, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Everything's gone." I invited him to sit. We talked for hours, really talked, perhaps for the first time since childhood. He'd hit bottom, lost Vanessa, now married to her shipping magnate, burned through his remaining resources on hopeless litigation. When he left, he had a job, entry-level, no special treatment, and a chance to rebuild. "Why help me at all?" he asked at the door. "Because bridges are better than walls," I replied. Grandfather understood that, eventually. Vanessa reached out once, through an acquaintance, suggesting lunch to catch up. I politely declined. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. Blackstone retired last year, handing his firm's leadership to his daughter. At his retirement party, he pulled me aside. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said. "Not of the money or the business. Those were just tools. He'd be proud of what you've built with those tools." What I've learned through all of this isn't what most people would expect. It wasn't some simplistic moral about money corrupting or karma delivering justice. The truth is more nuanced, more human. Trust must be calibrated carefully, neither given blindly nor withheld completely. My grandfather tested everyone, perhaps too harshly, but he wasn't wrong that character reveals itself under pressure. I've learned to watch what people do when no one important is looking. The executive who helps the janitor pick up scattered papers. The wealthy client who treats restaurant staff with respect. These small moments reveal more than any interview or resume. Power amplifies who we already are. My cousins weren't corrupted by wealth. They were exposed by it. Similarly, the homeless man who shares his last granola bar isn't noble because he's poor. He's noble despite being poor. Character exists independent of circumstances, though circumstances can reveal it. Jeremiah taught me this during those desperate nights under the bridge. "Rich or poor, you're still yourself," he told me once. "Money just lets you be more of whatever you already are." 3 months ago, I returned to the Aurora Bridge, standing in the same spot where I'd contemplated the black water below. I brought Jeremiah with me, now clean-shaven and healthy, though he refused to trade his worn jacket for anything more expensive. "Reminds me where I've been," he explained. We watched a young man standing at the railing, looking down with the same hollow expression I'd worn 2 years earlier. Together, we approached him. "Spare some change?" Jeremiah asked, just as he'd asked me. The young man turned, startled. "I don't have anything." "Neither did this guy when I met him," Jeremiah nodded toward me. "But he shared anyway. Sometimes the people with nothing are the ones who give the most." We took him to dinner, listened to his story, laid off, evicted, abandoned by people he thought were friends. A familiar tale. By dessert, he had a place in one of our transitional housing programs and an interview scheduled at a Reeves subsidiary. Months later, he's managing that program, helping others who arrive in the same condition. The circle completes itself, again and again. The sandwich shared under a bridge becomes a meal program feeding thousands. The granola bar split 3 ways becomes a nutritional initiative in schools. My grandfather's test, cruel as it seemed, becomes a framework for identifying genuine need and authentic character. I still have the plane ticket to Monaco, framed on my office wall. What once represented my lowest moment now reminds me that rock bottom can be a foundation if you choose to build from it. To anyone watching this who feels they've lost everything, I understand that hollow place. I've lived in that emptiness. What I can tell you is this. Your story isn't over yet. The chapter you're in right now, the one that feels like an ending, might actually be the beginning of something you can't yet imagine. Loss strips away pretense. It reveals who stands with you when there's nothing to gain. It shows you who you truly are when all external markers of identity are removed. That knowledge, painful as it is to acquire, becomes invaluable in rebuilding. And you will rebuild. Perhaps not the same life you had before, something different, possibly something better. Because once you've seen both sides of fortune's wheel, you gain perspective few ever achieve. You'll recognize what truly matters. Not the mansion's square footage, but who sits beside you at the dinner table. Not the car's horsepower, but who helps push when it breaks down. Time reveals truth in unexpected ways. My grandfather understood this better than anyone. The watch he gave me, this simple silver timepiece that most would value at a few $100s, was never about telling time. It was about understanding it. Understanding that truth doesn't arrive on our schedule, that justice follows its own clock, that wisdom accumulates with each passing hour. I still open that watch every morning, running my finger over the inscription. The microchip inside may have unlocked my inheritance, but the words engraved there unlocked something far more valuable, a philosophy that guides every decision I make now. Last month, we launched the Time Reveals Foundation, focused specifically on long-term solutions to homelessness. Not just shelters and soup kitchens, though those matter, but pathways to sustainable independence, education, mental health support, addiction treatment, and most importantly, community. We hire from within the homeless population whenever possible. Who better understands these challenges than those who've lived them? Maria, now 78, sits on our advisory board, her quiet wisdom shaping programs that have already helped hundreds transition from streets to stability. Dignity first, she always reminds us. Everything else follows. Jeremiah leads our financial literacy program, teaching budgeting skills with the same precision he once applied as a corporate CFO. Money is just a tool, he tells every class. Learn to use it, don't let it use you. James has surprised everyone, including himself. After 18 months in entry-level positions, he's now managing our corporate outreach division, connecting Reeves subsidiaries with second-chance employment initiatives. His transformation wasn't instant or easy. There were relapses into old patterns, moments of resentment, the difficult work of rebuilding trust. But last week, I overheard him telling a new employee, "My cousin saved my life by making me earn my way back." I didn't correct him. The truth is, he saved himself. I just provided the opportunity. My Aunt Elaine and I have Sunday dinner once a month now. Not the formal affairs at her house that I dreaded as a child, but simple meals where conversation flows more freely than the wine. She's softened with age and perspective, occasionally even sharing stories about my parents that she'd previously kept locked away. "Your mother would have handled everything better than I did," she admitted recently. "She always saw the best in people, like you do." Diana has found unexpected fulfillment curating art for hospitals and recovery centers. The right painting in the right place can speak to someone when words fail, she explained, showing me a gallery of patient artwork inspired by her installations. Marcus, 3 years sober, mentors others fighting addiction. His experience navigating both extreme privilege and its sudden loss gives him unique insight. "Rock bottom has better views than you'd expect," he tells his groups. "You can see everything clearly from down there." As for Vanessa, I heard she's divorced already, a detail that registers with surprising indifference. The pain that once felt all-consuming has faded to a dull footnote in my story. Some betrayals ultimately lead to better paths. Last week, I returned to the Hôtel de Paris in Monaco, booking the same suite 512 where Blackstone had revealed my grandfather's plan. I brought the pocket watch, placing it on the same table where I'd first learned its secret. "Mr. Reeves, is there anything you need?" Claude asked, the same attendant who'd met me at the airport 2 years earlier. "Just some time to think," I replied. After he left, I opened my laptop and finalized the details for our newest initiative, the Earl Reeves Transparency Project. Starting next quarter, all Reeves companies will publish comprehensive reports on environmental impact, labor practices, executive compensation, and community investment. No creative accounting, no greenwashing. Just honest assessment of where we're succeeding and failing. My grandfather built his empire in an era when business could operate behind closed doors. I'm choosing to open those doors, inviting scrutiny and accountability. Some board members resisted initially, concerned about competitive disadvantage. If being honest puts us at a disadvantage, I told them, then we deserve to lose. The watch ticked quietly beside me as I worked, its steady rhythm a reminder that change happens moment by moment, choice by choice. My grandfather engineered a dramatic revelation in my life, but the true transformation has been incremental. Daily decisions to prioritize impact over income, substance over status, character over convenience. I've learned there are no shortcuts to building something meaningful, just as there are no shortcuts to rebuilding yourself after everything falls apart. To those watching who feel forgotten, invisible, or discarded, your value isn't determined by others' assessment. The people who abandoned me when I had nothing are not the ones standing beside me today. True connections emerge from genuine moments, sharing food under a bridge, offering kindness without agenda, seeing humanity where others see only circumstance. The greatest wealth I've gained isn't in my bank accounts or investment portfolios. It's in the clarity that comes from having seen both extreme privilege and absolute deprivation. It's in knowing with certainty what matters and what doesn't. Time doesn't just reveal truth, it distills it, refines it, until all that remains is what's essential. And what's essential, I've found, is remarkably simple. Be worthy of the trust others place in you. Share what you have, especially when you have little. Remember that we are all one unexpected moment away from needing compassion we haven't earned. The watch continues ticking, marking not just the passage of time, but the accumulation of choices that ultimately define who we become. Not the choices made when everyone is watching, but the ones made in private moments, when character speaks louder than circumstance. That, I believe, is what my grandfather wanted me to understand all along. If this story touched your soul, if you believe justice exists and that we can rise from the ashes, please like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. In the comments, share your own story of overcoming adversity. Let's support each other. Share this video with someone going through a difficult time. Remember, your story isn't over yet, and the best chapters may be still to come. We have 2 incredible stories appearing on screen now. Choose one to continue this journey of hope. Until the next video, may you find your own victorious turning point. God bless you.
Tentar novamente? O Cloud pode cometer erros. Confira sempre as respostas.